My name is Melanie. I'm standing in the middle of the Portland Art Museum Gala, surrounded by people in elegant attire, yet all I can focus on is the woman in front of me. She's in a deep navy suit, her silver hair cut close, and there are tears in her eyes as she whispers, "I've been looking for you for 28 years. It all started 7 months ago, on October 11th. My wife, Vivian, who is 45 years old, was straightening my tie in the parking garage of the museum. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Melanie, tonight is crucial. This isn't the time for your tales from your work in the Amazon. Just smile, hold your drink, and let me handle everything." Vivian is the events director of a well-known real estate firm called Sterling Properties. She was dressed in a gown that cost over $10,000, her auburn hair pinned up so perfectly it looked like a work of art. She was beautiful, but at that moment, she was looking at me like I was a problem she hadn't solved. "Stay in the back," she added as an afterthought. "Don't embarrass me." Then she smoothed her lipstick in the reflection of a parked BMW and clicked her heels towards the elevator, leaving me in a rented tuxedo, holding a parking ticket I didn't know what to do with. I've spent 20 years working in environmental conservation, mainly in the Amazon rainforest. A severe back injury and burnout forced me to return to Portland. Now, I work part-time as a consultant for an environmental nonprofit in the Hawthorne district. I spend most mornings sipping coffee on my balcony, watching the city wake up and pretending I'm at peace with this new, quieter life. Vivian and I have been married for 12 years. We met at a charity auction. She was organizing the event, and I was one of the speakers, jet-lagged and wearing a shirt I'd bought in a Brazilian market. She thought I was charming in the way one might find an old, weathered tree charming, interesting to look at but not necessarily practical. For a long time, our marriage worked. She was organized, ambitious, and well-connected. I was worldly, easygoing, and always ready to support her. But when she got promoted to Senior Client Relations Director, things changed. Her new job meant a different social circle, high-end corporate events, and dinners at restaurants where the prices were never on the menu. Vivian thrived in these events, while I felt like a lost soul. I'd nod at the right times but forget people's names within minutes. She started correcting me in public. At first, it was small things like, "Melanie, that's the other environmental group, not this one." Or, "Melanie, let's not talk about deforestation tonight." Over time, her corrections became more pointed, and she started positioning me at the edges of conversations, steering me towards the bar or the restroom while she worked the room. I told myself I didn't mind, that I was just tired, and maybe she was protecting me from my own irrelevance. The Portland Art Museum Gala was hosted by the Cascadia Cultural Alliance. It was held on the top floor of the museum, overlooking the Westmoreland Park. I'd walked through that park countless times, with its old oaks and people walking their dogs. But from up there, at night, with twinkling lights and a live band, the city looked magical. The event was the Alliance's annual fundraiser, but this year it was extra important. The longtime main donor, a man named Walter Hill, had sold his controlling stake in the Alliance to a private investor. Everyone said the new owner was flying in from Los Angeles for this event. No one knew much about her, just that she was wealthy, serious, and had very specific ideas about how the Alliance should be run. Vivian had been working on this relationship for 3 months. The investors team had been in touch with Sterling Properties about potential real estate investments, and tonight was our chance to make a good impression. Vivian had rehearsed her talking points, bought a new gown, and had her assistant research the investors' preferences and charitable history. She didn't tell me anything about who the investor was, and I assumed she thought I didn't need to know. The room was filled with about 300 people. I recognized a few faces, as Portland's social scene isn't that large. Most of the people there moved through wealth as easily as I once moved through the dense rainforest. I did as Vivian asked. I stayed near the edge, got a glass of sparkling water, and listened to the band play a song I couldn't quite place. I was having a great conversation with a retired professor named Henry, who was passionate about bird watching in the Columbia River Gorge. Suddenly, there was a change in the atmosphere. It wasn't a sound or an announcement, it was just that feeling you get when someone important arrives. Heads turned, conversations paused, and even the band seemed to play softer. I turned with everyone else, and my breath caught in my throat. She was around 65 years old, tall with a military-like posture. Her hair was silver, and she wore a deep navy suit with a single strand of pearls that probably cost more than my car. She was flanked by 2 young assistants. But what made my heart stop was her face. I knew that face in a way that went beyond a photo or a news article. It was like looking at a part of myself. It was the bone structure, the angle of the jaw, and the light in her eyes that I saw every day in the mirror. She was moving through the room, shaking hands and accepting greetings with a focused and efficient manner. I couldn't move. Henry was still talking, but I couldn't hear a word. Then she stopped in the middle of a handshake with the Alliance's executive director, turned, and looked directly at me. I don't know how long we stood there. It felt like an eternity. Then she said something to her assistant, who nodded, and she started walking towards me. She walked past the executive director, past a city council member, and past Vivian, who was standing a few feet away with her hand half extended. When she was close enough, I saw that her eyes were filled with tears. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I've been looking for you for 28 years. Behind her, I heard the sound of glass shattering on the marble floor. I turned to see Vivian standing still, her champagne glass in pieces at her feet. Her name was Isabella Thompson. She was born Isabella Rodriguez in Portland in 1958. She grew up in the Alberta neighborhood, the daughter of a Mexican father and a Scandinavian mother who met at a local diner and built a small business from scratch. That night, all I knew was that she was standing in front of me, saying, "You look exactly like him." Exactly. It's like looking at a photograph come to life. Like who? I managed to ask. My brother, she said. My half-brother. His name was Diego. Then her assistant quietly said, "Miss Thompson, the Alliance director is." "I know," she said, not taking her eyes off me. 5 minutes. Then she asked me, "Will you still be here in an hour when the speeches are done?" "I'm not going anywhere," I said, meaning it more than I had in years. Vivian found me a few minutes later. She was furious but trying to keep it together until she could get some privacy. She stopped in front of me, glanced at Isabella, and then back at me. "What was that?" she asked quietly. "She thought she recognized me," I said. "Recognized you?" Vivian's voice was flat. "Melanie, that woman is the reason we're here tonight. Do you understand what you just did?" I told her that Isabella didn't really know me, that she just thought I looked like someone. Vivian stared at me, then picked up a fresh glass of champagne and said, "Stay available. And don't tell her anything about your non-profit work until I've introduced myself properly. She can't find out we're connected before I've set the context." Then she walked away to deal with the Alliance director. What Vivian didn't know was that I was adopted. I was adopted as a baby by a couple in Beaverton, named Carl and Emily Foster. Carl was a software engineer, and Emily was a school librarian. They were kind, loving people who made me feel like I was their own from the start. I never searched for my biological family because I respected the life the Fosters had given me, but deep down, I was afraid of what I might find. When the speeches ended, Isabella's assistant came to me and said, "Miss Thompson would like to speak with you privately in a side gallery." I followed him through a pair of glass doors, down a short hallway past some local art, and into a small, empty gallery. Isabella was already sitting there with a glass of water. She looked calmer but still composed in a way that seemed carefully put together. She motioned for me to sit. "I owe you an explanation," she began. "And maybe an apology for the scene." "There was no scene," I said. "You were very dignified." She almost smiled. "My assistant would disagree. She set down her water glass and looked at me directly. You know you're adopted, she said, not as a question. Yes, I replied. Do you know anything about your biological family? Nothing. The adoption was closed, and I never tried to open it. She nodded slowly. My father's name was Alejandro Rodriguez. He was born in Mexico City and came to Portland in 1955 when he was 20. He worked in construction most of his life. He wasn't a faithful man. She said this matter-of-factly. He had 3 children with my mother, and we thought those were all his kids. But when he died in 1992, we found letters and documents and a name. She reached into her small clutch bag and took out a photograph. It was an old black and white photo of a young man, maybe 25, standing on a bridge with the mount hood in the background. He was laughing, wearing a flannel shirt and work boots. He had my jaw, my eyes, and the same way of standing with his weight shifted to the left. His name was Diego Rodriguez, she said. He was my half-brother, my father's son from a relationship before my parents' marriage. Diego was born in 1967 to a woman named Maria Lopez, who gave him up for adoption 3 months after his birth. Diego died in a motorcycle accident in 1991 at the age of 24. He was married for 18 months before he died, and his wife was pregnant. The child was born in the summer of 1992. The child's name, after years of searching through closed court records, is Melanie. She explained that Diego's wife remarried and moved, making the records difficult to track. Then Carl and Emily Foster adopted me, and the trail went cold. She said she'd hired 3 different investigators over 28 years, and the last one finally found the sealed record 6 months ago and confirmed it this month. I was holding the photograph, unable to look away. I have an uncle, I said finally, feeling strange saying it out loud. I have cousins, I added. 2 cousins, she said. My brother Luis's children. They live in Eugene. Luis is 62. He cried when I told him we'd found you. She hesitated. We don't expect anything from you. This isn't about business or the alliance. I came to this event because I've committed to it, and finding you has been a long-held wish. I don't want to complicate your life. I thought about Vivian in the other room, trying to manage the situation. I thought about Carl and Emily, who had taught me so much and made me feel loved. I thought about Diego, standing on that bridge, laughing at something I'd never know. You're not complicating my life, I said. I was in that gallery for over an hour. When I finally went back to the main room, the band had been replaced by a string quartet, and most of the appetizers were gone. Vivian was standing near the bar with the Alliance's board chair. When she saw me, she excused herself and walked towards me with a purposeful stride. Where have you been? She asked. Talking with Isabella Thompson, I said. Her expression changed rapidly. For an hour? Yes, I replied. Melanie, she took a breath. Do you have any idea how this looks? She left everyone to talk to you for an hour. I've been trying to manage this all evening. She's my aunt, I said. Vivian stopped. My father's name was Diego Rodriguez. He died in 1991. He was Isabella Thompson's half-brother. And I didn't know any of this until about 45 minutes ago. The noise of the bar continued around us, and the string quartet played softly. Vivian looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. You're adopted. You knew that, she said. I knew that, but I didn't know. Melanie, she's one of the wealthiest private investors on the West Coast. Do you understand what you're saying? You're saying you're her family, I said. I'm saying I'm her family. She stared at me. This changes things, she said, not accusingly but more in a wondering way. Yes, I said. It does. I excused myself and went back to Henry, who was still talking about bird watching. I stood with him and really listened this time. I thought about what Isabella had said as we parted. She'd shaken my hand and held it for a moment, like my mother used to do when I was sick. "Your father would have been proud," she'd said. "Everything I've learned about your work in the Amazon, he would have understood that." Diego had that spirit, too. I couldn't say anything then. I just nodded. But standing there, listening to Henry, I felt something inside me start to loosen. The weeks after the gala were the strangest of my life. Isabella sent a formal letter through her lawyer. It outlined what she knew about Diego, his relationship with my mother, and the family's search. It included copies of documents and a photo of Diego's grave in a local cemetery, just a 15-minute drive from my house. I drove there one Saturday morning. It was raining, as it often does in Portland. In front of a simple granite headstone that read, Diego Alejandro Rodriguez, 1967 to 1991, beloved son and husband, I stood for a long time. I didn't know what I expected to feel. Maybe some sense of closure or connection. What I felt was a simple and strange feeling of finally confirming something I'd always suspected but couldn't name. I realized that I had a story, that someone had existed who was part of why I was here. I had a father who had died too young and never knew I was born, but he'd passed something on to me, a restlessness, a need to make a difference. 3 weeks later, I had coffee with Luis at a trendy cafe in the Pearl District. Luis is a big man with gray hair at his temples and deep laugh lines. He looked at me for the first few minutes without saying a word, then said, "You've got his hands." "Diego's?" I asked. "Yeah, long fingers. He was terrible at construction because he was always worried about his hands," he said, laughing warmly. We talked about Diego, Isabella, and his kids, Sofia and Javier. They were in their early 30s, and they were eager to meet me. Luis also asked about my marriage. I didn't answer right away. "It's complicated," I said. He nodded, understanding there was more to it. Vivian and I hadn't been fighting, exactly. We'd been avoiding direct confrontation, circling each other in our house, speaking in empty sentences while the real issues went unaddressed. The gala had cracked something open, not because of Isabella but because it was new information on top of an old problem. One evening in November, I made dinner. It was just pasta, a salad, and a bottle of local wine we'd been saving. When Vivian came home, I asked her to sit down. "What is this?" she asked. "Dinner," I said. "And a conversation I should have had a year ago." We ate in silence for a few minutes, then I started talking. I talked about the moment in the parking garage, about the small moments that had added up over the years, about how I'd made myself smaller. I wasn't sure if I'd done it to protect her or to avoid admitting something was wrong. Vivian listened without interrupting. When I was done, she was quiet for a long time. "I didn't know I was doing it," she said finally. "Or maybe I knew and told myself it was for your good. I thought you were uncomfortable at those events. But I think I wanted you to be more manageable, and that's not right." I agreed. She also admitted that she'd been thinking about the business implications, but that wasn't all. "I've been scared, Melanie. You came back from the Amazon so capable, and then you let me treat you like a piece of furniture. I didn't understand why, and it made me love you less, which is backwards, but it's how I felt. I was tired," I said. "I came home because I needed someone to take care of me, and then I resented you for taking control." "We're a mess," she said. "We're a mess," I agreed. She refilled our glasses. "I'd like to meet Isabella," she said. "If it's okay, if she'd be willing." "She would," I said. "She's already asked about you." "What did you tell her?" she asked. "I told her you were complicated, and so was I." Isabella came to Portland again in December. The three of us had dinner at a Spanish tapas restaurant. At first, Isabella and Vivian were cautious with each other, sizing each other up. But after a couple of glasses of wine, Isabella told a story about Diego that made me laugh so hard I almost spilled my drink. I saw Vivian's expression soften, and it was like a wall.